Welcome to Evidence Base, a new Harbinger psychology podcast. I'm your host, Cassie Stossel. On today's episode, we're talking about how journaling using DBT skills can help soothe emotions with Dylan Zambrano, author of the DBT Skills Daily Journal. Dylan is founder and clinical director of DBT Virtual, an online dialectical behavior therapy service based in Ontario, Canada. He has several years of experience working on a DBT team with an outpatient mental health hospital setting and provides DBT training, consultation, and supervision to other therapists. Dylan also teaches university continuing education courses and workshops in mindfulness and compassion meditation for healthcare professionals. Hi, Dylan. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you, but I wanted to start with the basics. Can you talk about what the core DBT skills that help soothe emotions are?
Absolutely. So, DBT has four major categories of skills. And so we refer to those as mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness skills. So, to answer your question about what skills help us soothe our emotions, I mean, quite a few of them do. Mindfulness skills can certainly help us with things like noticing where our attention goes to be able to have greater attention, greater control of our attention, to be able to redirect the attention perhaps when emotions are surfacing and our attention's getting quite dysregulated or distracted. Mindfulness can be a way of paying attention that allows us to notice those experiences and to be able to redirect our attention towards experiences that are maybe a bit more effective for handling our emotions. We've also got distress tolerance skills, and those are a set of skills that can help us to manage really big emotions and to actually kind of dial down the intensity with quick in the moment strategies. And then there's a set of emotion regulation skills that can help us manage mild to moderate range emotions, that can help us to handle emotions by either reducing their frequency, in some cases reducing their intensity, but helping us with emotions that tend to be quite unpleasant or uncomfortable to sit with, so that those emotions aren't taking control.
You wrote a journal, so why is journaling an effective tool for coping and skill building?
So, journaling can be a really helpful way to externalize what's happening internally. So, when we're experiencing painful emotions, intense emotions, difficult thought patterns, journaling by bringing a pen to paper and writing down and processing what's happening in the moment can be a way to externalize that experience, to create awareness of that experience that's happening internally, and to create some distance between ourself and those unpleasant, uncomfortable experiences. Because when we can create that distance, it creates a space for intentional reflection, for choice in how we respond to those experiences. And the way that the DBT Skills Daily Journal was designed was to have very intentional journal prompts. Because something that I often hear is that people try to start journaling, and it seems a bit unstructured. They don't know where to kind of go with their journaling. They don't know if they're doing it right. And the prompts that are included in the journal are very intentional, that invite an awareness of emotions, that create an opportunity to set goals for the day, to anticipate challenges that might show up, and then to also reflect on, how did the day go? What were the challenges? What am I grateful for? And what were my accomplishments in practicing these skills? And so there's several prompts throughout the journal that also allow for intentional reflection on and practice of the DBT skills. And this is a way to integrate cognitive rehearsal of the skills, because if we have knowledge of the DBT skills, I mean, that's certainly a starting point, but knowledge alone isn't necessarily going to lead to change and integration of those skills in the moments where they're most needed. And so the journal prompts in the DBT Skills Daily Journal invite that intentional reflection and practicing through writing how we might integrate those skills in the moments where we wish for those skills to show up, by reflecting on perhaps past moments where we would have wished that we could have integrated the skills, or in future moments where we wish to integrate those skills in anticipated future difficulties.
Yeah, I appreciate how accessible it is. For me, I like the prompts and, the reflection pieces because journaling is something I've always done, but I find myself judging my own journaling. Sometimes I'll be like, I'm just being too negative in my journal, which is such a weird criticism to have because it's my journal. I don't have to read it again. Like that's a space to work out that. So I appreciate the structuredness of this. I think that makes the journaling an easier entry point as well as learning those DBT skills.
Right. And it really was a way to make the journaling process more DBT informed because I mean, to my knowledge, prior to this journal, I hadn't really come across another journal like this that was infused with DBT skills that promoted the application and intentional reflection on how we can integrate DBT skills through journal writing. And so, for those who have participated in DBT before or are participating in DBT, or perhaps may not even know what DBT is and it's their first introduction to it, people can pick up the journal and be able to start reflecting on those skills right there.
And what role, as we're talking about the mindfulness piece, what role does mindfulness play in compassion?
So, I mean, mindfulness is something that is really practiced throughout the entire journaling process. The moment we pick up the book and we are already setting intentions for how we want to use the book, and really bring intentional reflection to how we want to integrate the DBT skills. And so mindfulness is also a skill that we of course practice outside of journaling, and it's really a skill of skillful awareness. I often like to describe mindfulness as a skill of attention and intention. It's a skill whereby we bring our attention to the moment, and in that space we can be more intentional with how we respond in that moment. And compassion or compassion meditation is another contemplative practice, and it can be a meditative practice, much like mindfulness can be. And so, when it comes to compassion training, all compassion training programs agree that we need to first train our attention through mindfulness training in order to bring forth these compassionate intentions. So, mindfulness is that way of paying attention and being more intentional. And when in that space of awareness in the moment and deliberateness in how we respond in that moment, we can use or apply our focus on compassionate intentions. And so, compassion in practice, what that looks like is it's a way of attending to the suffering of a person or attending to a person's experience with the concern for their well-being that is paired with this wish to alleviate that person's suffering or to promote their well-being in some way. So with mindfulness we can bring our deep intentions for compassion and to be able to either extend these compassionate wishes through meditation or to act with compassion, so to set intentions to be more compassionate with that person who's potentially suffering or whose well-being we want to contribute to. And so compassion is something that can be practiced or done towards another person. It's also something that can be done towards ourselves. But I mean, it can be very easy to kind of get swept away and lose sight of compassion oftentimes towards ourselves. And so it truly is something that we do need to bring attention to and be intentional about practicing, especially towards ourselves.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about just lends itself really well to the process of journaling. I want to ask about wise mind. What is that concept and what are some practical tools that we can use to tap into our own inner wisdom?
Wise mind is a state of wisdom, of integration, of intuition. And it might sound a bit vague the way that I'm describing it here, but it's a state that comes from the synthesis between these two other states of mind, which we call in DBT the reasonable mind and the emotion mind. And so, simply put, like this is a way of integrating logically what we think in a given situation and emotionally how we feel in that same situation. So wise mind doesn't ignore either. It actually makes space for both so that we can sense into why the emotion might be here, what this emotion is telling us to do, and really paying attention to some of the messages that this emotion might be here to tell us. But it's balanced by reason. It's balanced by logic, and so we stay in control. We stay in the driver's seat so that we don't get swept away by that emotion, because it's balanced by logic, by reason, by consideration of consequences in our goals. And so, let's say, for example, you are going to a job interview and maybe you notice emotion mind creeping up because emotion mind saying, maybe emotion mind's coming up with all these worries, perhaps saying, well, maybe I shouldn't go. I'm probably not going to get the job. And so creating all of these worries and predictions about this job interview going negatively that are potentially leading to these urges to just completely avoid it. I mean, that's certainly not going to land you the job. And so if we kind of shift the attention towards what reasonable mind might have to say here, well, I know that if I don't show up, I'm certainly not going to get the job, right? So we're starting to think about the consequences. And then goals, right? It's important to bring awareness to both short-term and long-term goals, which sometimes, I mean, oftentimes the emotion mind can ignore, but perhaps awareness of reasonable mind and integrating that state of mind reminds us that how important this job is, right? There's a reason why we applied to it. There's a reason why we want to show up to this interview, because in our wise mind we know that this is perhaps a really great opportunity, something that we are looking forward to pursuing in our career.
Just personally, I feel like one, because of where I work, I have this logical brain that's like, this is why I'm feeling anxious about this. But in practice, tapping into that, the wise mind where I know one, the origin of the anxiety, also logically, I know how to soothe myself, but it's still like that heightened feeling of anxiety. So how do you tap into that when logically you know what to do? You know where it's coming from, you know what to do, but it's still like that heightened feeling of emotions bubbling up.
Well, wise mind is the state of mind that will recognize that if we give in to the emotion and its urges, that will somehow conflict with our long-term goals, potentially as well our values. And so at the same time, we lean into the emotion and explore, well, why is this emotion here? If the emotion is anxiety or fear based, that maybe this is our body that's really looking out for us, right? It's recognizing we're about to enter an unpredictable, uncertain, unfamiliar situation, and we truly don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. I think those emotions also suggest that perhaps how important an interview might be for you. And so, in a moment where we notice the emotion and we ensure that it's balanced by some of these things like awareness of the consequences of acting on that emotion and these longer term goals, that's a space in which that we can then invite consideration of alternative skills, right? So we can use specific wise mind practices, perhaps by, there's a series of wise mind practices that are really about grounding our attention in the moment, focusing on the breath. And so you might do things like focusing on the pauses between each breath. You might do things such as focusing on how the air is cooler on the in breath and warmer on the out breath. Or maybe you just notice the length of the inhale and the length of the exhale, right? And all of these are intended to help us get grounded and into our center because they bring our attention into the moment and allow us to be more intentional in that moment. So there's that attention and intention that I was describing with mindfulness. And it's in that moment where, as you were saying, if still like emotionally we're feeling heightened, and grounding our attention into this moment and getting to our wise mind, we recognize I'm still feeling really overwhelmed. We might turn to additional skills. We might integrate other DBT skills that can help with this self-regulation process, right? So especially when emotions are very heightened, we certainly want to be kind of matching the intensity of those emotions, maybe turning to a certain grouping of skills that we call crisis survival skills if our emotions are very heightened. But also certainly, considering, do I pair some skills here? Do I use these skills repeatedly? Because the greater the intensity of our emotions, the more skills we should be using, right? So if we're trying to get to wise mind and we're still feeling heightened, is where we want to consider, do I need to keep using skills here? Do I need to integrate additional skills or turn to alternative skills that might be most needed here to help with regulating my emotions?
Yeah, absolutely. That leads me to ask about distress tolerance skills, which is my favorite of the DBT strategies. So I want to ask what those are, like what are some specific ones, and why are they so effective?
So distress tolerance skills are grouped into two different skill sets. So we call them crisis survival skills and reality acceptance skills. So there's lots of skills within each of these. But generally speaking, crisis survival skills are skills that do exactly that. They help us to survive crises. And so, crisis situations are often those moments where emotion mind gets very intense. And so, we may not be able to access that reasonable mind. We may have difficulty considering some of those things like goals and consequences. And the body feels so overwhelmed with emotion that it makes it difficult to sort of escape out of that experience with the mind alone. So, crisis survival skills are a range of often very quick, very practical skills that function as a way to down regulate very intense emotions and not necessarily get rid of emotions. They're not distress removal skills, they're distress tolerance skills. And so there's skills that help us to tolerate that distress so that we can stay with that emotion, so we can stay in that experience without reacting on it in ways that are problematic or perhaps create new problems. So skills like distraction, skills like self-soothing. We have a range of skills in DBT that we refer to as the tip skills to regulate the body's physiological response when emotional intensity is high. And then we've got those reality acceptance skills. And so reality acceptance are a set of skills that help us, again, to do just that, to accept reality. And more specifically, what that means is, especially in moments where we're faced with difficulty, distress, or painful or undesirable circumstances, there are a set of skills that help us to accept that reality with our whole selves. And so by our whole selves, we mean with our thoughts, with our actions, with our bodies, with our posture, with our whole being, that we bring this accepting stance or perspective or attitude to the experience to help us cope more effectively with whatever sort of like distressing or undesirable circumstances might be arising for us in that moment.
We'll be right back after this short break.
Hello, I'm Dr. Matthew McKay, creator of Therapy Assist. We've designed Therapy Assist to be an accessible and efficient platform. By providing a library of thousands of resources and the ability to customize workbooks, we're putting evidence-based tools in your hand, helping to improve client outcomes. Research consistently shows that between session homework can significantly improve client outcomes and reduce dropout. But finding the right tools to assign can be time-consuming. Therapy Assist makes this process faster and easier. You can search through a library of curated resources, including psychoeducation, worksheets, exercises, meditations, and much more. You can use these resources both during your sessions and as homework assignments for clients, all with the confidence that they are rooted in evidence-based therapies. Therapy Assist's resource library is built on the firm foundation of New Harbinger Publications' 50-plus years of pioneering work in self-help and psychology. So you'll have resources created by world-renowned psychologists and researchers right at your fingertips. Our platform makes it easy for you to find exactly what you need with search filters and curated protocols. These comprehensive tools provide you with the ability to search for a resource by any combination of therapy type, presenting problem, transdiagnostic mechanism, intervention, or resource type. Therapy Assist helps you support more clients between sessions in less time. I know therapists often spend hours searching through files, books, or online to find the resources they need. Therapy Assist takes care of this for you, saving you valuable time you can use to focus on what matters most, helping your clients heal and thrive. With Therapy Assist, you can also review completed resources ahead of time, which means you'll be fully prepared for each session, ready to make the most of your time with your client. We understand the importance of having access to the most effective client resources in your work, and we're committed to continuously updating our library to keep pace with the latest research and cutting-edge tools in the field. Your clients' privacy and security are top priorities for us. Therapy Assist is fully HIPAA compliant, so you can trust that the data entered is kept safe and confidential. To start your free trial and find out how Therapy Assist can transform your practice, go to therapyassist.com. We're here to support you every step of the way.
One thing you mentioned was distraction. And I feel like we're so often told about the negatives of distracting ourselves. So I'd love to hear what some healthy distraction activities might look like.
And I love that you're bringing up that point because distractions can be used to a point of being ineffective. And the point where it becomes ineffective is where the distraction becomes an avoidance strategy, where there isn't any intention to return to the moment, to return to the problem where problem solving perhaps needs to happen. So distraction, I should say, firstly, is something that should be done temporarily. It's something that we should practice for a certain amount of time with that intention to return to whatever the problem or stressor is. Because if we don't return to it, then problems don't get solved, problems persist, we worsen problems, and so we can create, perhaps new problems and exacerbate problems to a point where we're faced with lots of distress in our lives. So there can be a range of different distraction techniques that we can pull from. And what I like to suggest is really focusing on distraction techniques that are unique to each individual. So engaging in things that are conducive to one's attention getting distracted, or activities that we can really get absorbed in without our minds wandering too much back to the stressor or back to the ruminative thoughts or intense emotions that we might be faced with in that moment of distress. And I say this because I know for myself, if I'm really stressed out about something, if I open up a book, I know that my eyes are going to be glancing at the page and looking at the words, but I know that my mind isn't there. I know that my mind's likely going to wander back to whatever my stressor is. And I know many people who reading works as a very effective distraction technique. And so I think that there's some uniqueness to the experience. I think we need to find what works well for each of us. But I typically do tend to suggest a certain grouping of distraction techniques, including distracting with different emotions and to distract with other thoughts. And so, with different emotions means that we're engaging in activities that generate different emotions than the one that we're experiencing in that moment. So, this does require, I think, some awareness of the emotion that we're experiencing in that moment, so that when we're using these types of distraction techniques, that we can ensure that we're going to generate something different, because we don't want to add to anxiety with more anxiety, right? We don't want to add more sadness to the sadness that we're already experiencing. And so we can do so by engaging in things that might generate pleasant emotions. Things like pulling up YouTube videos and searching cute puppy videos, or perhaps you open up your phone and you look at nostalgic travel photos. Or maybe you pull up a music playlist that also brings up some excitement or gives you a sense of confidence, or maybe brings up some nostalgia. So, what we're trying to do here is create different emotional experiences so that those can capture our attention and allow the other unpleasant emotions to settle before returning back to the stressor. And then there's the other set of distraction techniques that involve essentially thinking about other things, right? So if we can engage in activities that really capture our attention, that fill our attention with other thoughts, it can be a really effective way to prevent our mind wandering back to whatever the stressor is. And so again, maybe it's pulling up music that you know all the lyrics to and singing them out loud. Maybe it's doing some sort of game like a crossword puzzle, or you're pulling up some sort of a puzzle that really captures your attention, that gets you thinking about other things. Or maybe you're looking around the room and you are just labeling out loud all the subtle details that you notice, and you're really commenting on what you're seeing out loud, so that again you're filling your attention with other thoughts.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so this is why doom scrolling does not work.
Well, doom scrolling is one of those things that I think leads to avoidance, because I certainly know lots of people who have been caught up in that for several hours.
Yes, it's hard to get out of it, but it does increase that negative emotion that you're feeling. So, not the greatest. So, one of my personal favorite emotion regulation skills is opposite action. I had been practicing it a lot without realizing what it was called. Do you have some favorite emotion regulation skills that you turn to?
I mean, I might say I'm biased, and I love all of them. However, if I were to choose one, I would probably say mindfulness of current emotions. And so that's a skill where we're applying mindfulness as an emotion regulation strategy, where we're bringing our attention to our present moment emotions. And so the way that we practice this skill would be to notice where we feel the emotion in the body. So we're bringing attention to the physical sensations that arise with that emotion. And as we do, we just notice the waves of that emotion, that we notice the moment by moment changes where the emotion ebbs and flows, where in moments where it peaks and then it starts to settle down. And this is, I should say, a skill that we would want to use. I was saying earlier about the importance of using these emotion regulation skills in with the mild to moderate range emotions, because if we're trying to use mindfulness of emotions in a state where our emotions are really, really heightened, redirecting the attention to the emotion might be overwhelming in and of itself, right? And so, ideally, in that mild to moderate range, this is the space in which we can create a bit more of awareness and tolerance of the experience, because for many, emotions can be difficult experiences to settle into, to bring awareness to. But as we bring attention to emotions, it creates the space for more intention. It creates a space to take actionable steps to potentially alleviate that emotion if that's what's needed in the moment. But otherwise, it might be a skill that we use just to help us sit with the emotion, to prevent us from quickly turning away from it, avoiding the emotion, and therefore, as I was saying, helping us to create more of a tolerance of the experience, so that over time we have much more control over how we respond to our emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. I was wondering if you could talk about the concept of anticipatory coping and what that looks like in practice.
Anticipatory coping is really at the essence of our cope ahead skill. And so the cope ahead skill is a skill that helps us create a plan for when we are anticipating a future difficulty or stressor that we want to create a coping plan for in advance to help us skillfully navigate that difficulty. And so the cope ahead skill is best used when we really get detailed about the cope ahead plan. So the way that we practice this skill is by thinking about what the stressor is going to be, and then thinking about the skills that we would want to use in response to those stressors. And so we don't want to think too vaguely or generically about the stressor. So maybe going back to what we were saying earlier about an interview, we don't just want to, be coping ahead for an interview I'm feeling stressed out about. What we want to be coping with or coping ahead for are things like the thoughts that are going to show up, urges, maybe certain actions. We want to cope ahead for the things that will come up prior to the interview, during the interview, after the interview. So really thinking about this in a very detailed way is really going to allow us to come up with a really solid coping plan to help us navigate through all aspects of that stressful experience from start to finish. And how we can maybe optimize this particular skill and this coping plan is to engage in rehearsal of this coping plan. And so we typically suggest that we take a few moments to imagine ourselves going through those anticipated difficulties, again, like the thoughts, the urges, the actions that might show up, even the events that would show up from start to finish, and imagining ourselves experiencing them, as well as using our coping skills to help us manage those experiences.
I really like this anticipatory coping. It's the first time I've personally read about it, and I get a lot of anxiety for like doctor scans and stuff, and those are sometimes scheduled way in advance, but I'll find myself getting anxious about it weeks in advance. And so I really like this practical application of something that could really help with that coping of anxiety in advance of that, because like you said, what to expect emotion wise. Like, it's something, even the job interview, we've all been through one. It's not a new emotion that you're coping with to prepare for.
Absolutely. And so, especially when we can anticipate it, this would be a really effective skill to use. And it's really a combination of many of our other coping skills that we might have in our toolbox, because we're really thinking about what can I use here with this in this upcoming event, and really pulling from all skills that might be appropriate in the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of what we talked about as far as DBT skills today, so far, we're aiming to reduce those unpleasant emotions. But what are some ways we can increase our positive emotions, our pleasant emotions?
So, some of the skills that come from our emotion regulation category of skills include things like accumulating pleasant emotions in the short term and the long term, and building mastery. And so, what this looks like, accumulating pleasant emotions in the short term, is really about engaging in pleasant activities, but doing them mindfully, right? Because it's important that we're integrating short term pleasurable experiences, that we have regular pleasant activities that are integrated into our ideally daily routine, and that we're being mindful of those experiences. Because I'm sure, all of us can resonate with the experience of having a really great meal in front of you, but you're distracted. Maybe you're distracted with your thoughts, or you're distracted with something, maybe the TV in front of you, that you're not actually savoring the experience, that you're not attending to the experience with your attention. And so bringing mindfulness to the experience ensures that we really reap the benefits of that pleasant experience and experience the pleasant emotions that are expected to arise being in that pleasant experience. We can also accumulate these pleasant emotions in the long term. And the focus of this particular skill is by living our lives in accordance to our values. So, living a very values driven lifestyle where we are aligning our day to day actions with what's most important to us. And so, this does require a bit of an awareness of, or at least exploring what's most important to us, what are priorities for how we live our life, and aligning our actions so that we are constantly working towards those values. And that's expected to generate long-term satisfaction, fulfillment, and happiness. And then we've got the skill of building mastery. And building mastery is about doing things that give you a sense of accomplishment. And so this can include activities that maybe we're learning for the first time and we are feeling accomplished after completing the task. This could be things that we're already skilled at, that we already do, but we look for a challenge where, if I'm really good at cooking one recipe, then I might look to change up the recipe. I might look to add new ingredients to challenge myself and give myself that sense of accomplishment and pride after the task is completed. And so when we're building mastery, we want to look for new opportunities to build this mastery, to strengthen our skill set. And with the things that we might already be doing is to maybe look for that challenge that gives us that sense of pride after completing the task.
Yeah, and I feel like this kind of goes along with what I want to ask you about. So in your journal, the whole thing starts out with intention setting as a prompt, and I'm wondering if you could talk about why that's so important and why you put that at the forefront.
Right. Well, I mean, think about it this way. If you've ever had a New Year's resolution that was perhaps a bit vaguely defined, where it's like, I want to exercise more, but we don't necessarily think about what the specific goal is, what potential obstacles there might be, why this is important to me, then we may not feel the drive to actually pursue this goal. And so the intention setting at the start of the journal is really to do just that, is to help us think about our goals for how often we complete this journal, considering what's this linked to? Why is this important to me? Why do I want to accomplish this? Or am I doing this to promote some sort of change in my life? The intention setting also gets us considering, are there certain obstacles or barriers that might get in the way? And the skills or the strategies that might help us maintain and fulfill this commitment to regularly engaging in the journal. And so it's really about helping us create some accountability, helping us bring awareness to why completing this is important to us in the long term.
Yeah, I really like that. And along with planning, one part of the journal talks about a coping plan. Why is it important to have one? And is this paired sort of with that anticipatory coping or is this separate?
So, the anticipatory coping would be for a very specific event that we would be coping ahead for. The coping plan that's included in the journal is really about creating a plan that we can turn to in moments where we're experiencing emotional difficulties, and perhaps in moments where accessing our skills, trying to think about our skills, may be difficult to do. So it's intended to be a place that's, we can quickly turn to, that gives us some suggestions on certain distracting and self-soothing skills that we can use, supports that we can turn to, places that we can go that will help us cope and get through that moment of difficulty. And so this is really there for us to turn to if we're finding it difficult to cope on our own and think about skills on the spot.
Yeah, and Dylan, as we start to wrap up, I'm curious just what excites you the most about pairing DBT skills with journaling and sort of what brought you to this.
Well, the DBT Skills Daily Journal, I think, is really the first of its kind that really merges the practice of journaling with DBT skills. And so I think it's just a very unique journal that promotes the very practical applications of and consideration of skills in a bit of a accessible way. Many people have perhaps already completed DBT therapy before. Perhaps they just don't have the access to DBT. And so the journal was designed in such a way that was really intended to provide DBT skills to somebody who either has the experience with DBT or has never been introduced to DBT before. This was really intended to provide an opportunity for that intentional skills practice so that we're looking at the day ahead and inquiring, how do I feel in this moment? What's going to challenge me today? How can I integrate these skills? And at the end of the day, considering, well, what skills did I use? Where were my accomplishments? What am I grateful for? And we've got a new daily journal prompt each day that is infused with a DBT skill that's inspired by DBT skills from all of our categories. So the journal is structured in a way where for several days we've got mindfulness prompts, then we've got distress tolerance, then emotion regulation, and then interpersonal effectiveness skill prompts. So it really invites intentional reflection of how we can apply these skills and to really just promote more effective coping, better engagement with day to day stressors, and to promote just better emotion regulation and better relationships.
I totally agree and love the fact that you can enter this journal without any knowledge of DBT and you will take something away. So I appreciate the accessibility to DBT skills that you bring to this journal and paring it down so that somebody can really understand what they're working through and bring that mindfulness into their journaling practice. So that feels like a good place for us to wrap up, unless you have any final thoughts for the listeners.
That sounds good to me.
Thank you so much for your time and for your work, and I just really appreciate it. Thank you, Dylan.
Thanks so much for having me.
Transform negative thoughts, manage intense emotions, and improve overall well being in just 10 minutes a day. If you struggle to control intense thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, you're not alone. Millions suffer from severe emotion regulation problems resulting in anxiety, depression, and other mental health disorders. Negative thoughts, difficult emotions, and unhealthy behaviors are hard to manage and can be overwhelming. What you need is a quick, easy to commit to program for building greater self awareness and intentionality so you can take charge of your emotions and start living the life you want. The DBT Skills Daily Journal combines the popular method of guided journaling with dialectical behavior therapy skills building to offer an incredibly accessible program for transforming your negative thoughts and intense emotions. With only 10 minutes of daily written reflection, you'll strengthen the 4 core DBT skills: mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness that will help soothe your negative thoughts and emotions, improve resilience, and increase your overall well being. You'll also develop lifelong skills for better emotion control, and you'll do it in an easy, accessible, and accountable way. If you're looking for a go-to, take anywhere resource for getting your negative thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in check, you found it. The DBT Skills Daily Journal is an exciting new approach that will have you writing your way out of struggle and into a more meaningful and fulfilling life. Written by renowned mental health and wellness experts, New Harbinger's Journals for Change combine evidence-based psychology with proven effective guided journaling techniques to help you make lasting personal change, one page at a time. Visit our website at www.newharbinger.com and use coupon code PODCAST25 to receive 25% off your entire order. New Harbinger Publications is an independent, employee-owned publisher of books on psychology, health, spirituality, and personal growth. For over 50 years, our evidence-based self-help books and pioneering workbooks have helped readers make positive changes to improve mental health and well-being. Founded by psychologists Matthew McKay and Patrick Fanning, New Harbinger is proud to be an employee-owned company. Our books reflect our core values of integrity, sustainability, compassion, and trust. Written by leaders in the field and recommended by therapists worldwide, New Harbinger books are practical, accessible, and provide real tools for real change. The best continuing education training does more than just fulfill requirements. It opens your mind to new possibilities, increases your confidence, and gives you powerful tools to transform your clients' lives. Praxis Continuing Education and Training partners with world-class experts to create cutting-edge, evidence-based courses for mental and behavioral health professionals. Learn how to heal trauma with Robin Walzer, explore values with Kelly Wilson, and master the basics of acceptance and commitment therapy with Matt Boone through an on-demand course. Or join experts and like-minded professionals live to take your practice to a new level. Find your next training opportunity at praxiscet.com. That's praxiscet.com. Do you have an idea for another episode? Do you want to send us a message? Our email address is podcast@newharbinger.com. We'd love to hear from you. This podcast was edited by Jesse Fancushion. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love if you rated, reviewed, and subscribed to the show, and we hope that you might share it with anyone who could benefit from the content. This podcast is not a substitute for counseling with a licensed provider.